So how's it going, guys? Good. So like John was saying, I've been here for a few years. I've seen a lot of y'all grow up, and I've seen some graduate. The guys I had last year, they're already long gone, but, just a little bit more info about me real quick. I'm from around the area just like a lot of y'all are. I went to Bandy's, and of course, that's my school. So if you go to Bandy's, congrats. You're on God's plan right there, right? All right, and like I said, just briefly, outside of like a Wednesday night, you're probably going to find me camping. Sometimes I go camping with John and stuff like that, or, I'm just riding around on my tractor at the house. That's just kind of what I do. I might be defined as a redneck. Look at my shirt. I have Dale Jr. on there right now. All right, as we get started, I kind of want to have a conversation with some of y'all before we really get too deep into this, but I've got a real simple question for you. So for y'all who drive, or maybe you don't drive yet, but your parents drive, who is familiar with an app that has like a GPS on it, like Google Maps, Apple Maps, show of hands, Waze maybe? Right, I figured most people probably did, right? So what does that app do? Anybody can say it. Go ahead. Shows you the way. What else? That's pretty much it, right? Go ahead. Has a map. There you go. Appreciate it, Wyatt. You're right. Yeah, it gives you directions. One more. Sure. You got a fancy one then. Tells you where you're supposed to turn, right. Yeah, what I jotted down was that a GPS app will generally just going to give you multiple routes, and it's going to choose probably the best one for you to take, depending on whatever the traffic situation may be. So keep that kind of in the back of your mind right now. So got another question for you. This one's kind of geography related. Sorry, not trying to make it like school, but who is aware of like what the western United States looks like, such as like some of these desert states, maybe Arizona, Utah? Some of you, have y'all been there before? Yeah. You know what's it got out there that we don't have here? Oh, you did? Okay, so you've seen it before. All right, so for some common features for those states could be defined as some really tall mountains, and I have some pictures that I want to share with you. Like I said, we have some really tall mountains, and then they have really big cliffs, and like this sign right here, it actually says people have died falling off this cliff. They got cliffs out there that are super sketchy. They've got super big wide landscapes that are just barren. They only have a little bit of grass, and they're just so vast out there, right? Now that we've seen pictures like that, there's a few more that I want to share with you. Yeah, look at that. You got deep canyons, and then I think there's one more in there. They have cool features like these arches and really long roads. That road looks like the Forrest Gump road, does it not? When he's running down, that's actually out there in that area where that was filmed. But now that we've seen these pictures and we kind of have an idea of what these states look like, now think about where we live. When we're in spring right now, right? The trees are turning green, the grass is growing, it's super green where we are. And that's what's familiar to us. Does everybody kind of understand the difference between those two locations? I think it's pretty simple, right? And the reason why I wanted you to get the differences out of the way was about 2 years ago, and actually it was 2 years ago to yesterday, my wife, Lacey, and I, we actually took a trip out to Utah, and we traveled all around the state, and we just visited all the national parks that state had to offer. But there was one day that we needed to travel from a place called Bryce Canyon, and we were going to drive to Page, Arizona. And I have a picture of Bryce Canyon, and it showed, you might be familiar with it, so whenever it comes up, there you go. I don't know if y'all can really see, that's Bryce Canyon right there. It's one of the most well-known canyons in the world. And we needed to go to Page, Arizona, which had a place called Horseshoe Bend. You can show the next picture. There it is. That's Horseshoe Bend right there. I don't know if y'all have seen that in a picture before or not. But if any of y'all have really keen eyes, you're going to get bonus points tonight if you can spot the boat in this picture. Go ahead, Andy. It's in the right corner, top right corner. What's y'all's guess? It's where? On the left? Where out on the left? Right there? Well, y'all were closer than Andy. It's over on the left. It's actually in the kind of the left side. It's about this big. But the whole point of it is to show you how big this formation is. But like I said, me and Lacey, we were traveling from Bryce Canyon, and we needed to go to Page, Arizona to go see this. Now, remember when I asked y'all if anybody's familiar with a GPS app, right? So I put a screenshot up here that kind of defines that route. So this is just one that was on the computer. I put a screenshot on there, but it says it's going to take roughly 2.5 hours to get there, and it's a little over 150 miles. And that's cool, that's great, right? But here was the problem. So when we were out there and we were traveling around, and I typed it in my phone like every tourist would do when they don't know where they're going, my phone gave me multiple options. And one of the options was actually only around 90 miles. And that's what that one straight line I drew in right there, that's what that really kind of signifies, is that 90-mile route. And so with that 90-mile route, there was a caveat to it. It might have been shorter in distance, but it was actually longer in time. Well, being a prideful man that I happen to be when it comes to driving, I told my phone, I said, there's no way a 90-mile route was actually going to take longer than something that's 150 miles. There's no way. My logical mind couldn't comprehend. It just couldn't comprehend that something shorter was going to take longer. So, what'd I do? I called my phone's bluff, and I started driving down this road that's going to be shorter, right? I mean, that's great. And everything was great for about 20 minutes. So 20 minutes goes by, and we're driving. There's no traffic out there. Bo, your app was killing it that day. Absolutely no traffic. I think we passed one car. But something happened. And something happened to the road. It turned into dirt. So I'm on a paved road in a state that I've never been to before, and the road turned into dirt. And as you can see, like I said, we already looked at all the pictures of what Utah looks like. I'm driving through canyons and I'm driving through mountains. I mean, I think that's a river over there in the back. The only thing out there that I remember seeing was cows. So, like any good tourist, I just kept driving down this dirt road like it was a good idea. Who does that? I mean, literally, who goes down a dirt road in a state they've never been to before? I do, because that's what I did. Like I said, everything was just fine, but I kept driving on this road, and things were starting to turn a little weird in the sense of I haven't seen anybody in a while. And Lacey's starting to get a little bit nervous over here in the passenger seat. My knuckles are starting to turn a little bit white on the steering wheel because, again, we're driving down a dirt road in a state that we've never been to before. But I found a meme that I think really kind of defines how I was feeling on that day. There you go. So that's exactly how I felt while I was driving down that road. I might be acting like everything's cool, but clearly my world's actually burning up all around me. So, like I said, we're going down this road. I'm sitting there trying to hold it in, play it cool like I did this on purpose, of course. Something else happened while we were on this dirt road. Mind you, like I said, we haven't passed a car yet. We all have cell phone reception, so that GPS app I was talking about, completely worthless at that point. So we're on a dirt road in a state in the middle of a desert that we've never been to before and have zero cell phone reception. It was literally like something from these murder mystery podcasts that my wife listens to. That's exactly where they dump bodies at, was where we were at driving around that day. So, like any tourist might consider, do you think about turning around at this point? Nah, you're right, I didn't think I needed to because I had already chosen to take a shortcut anyways, so why would I backtrack just to get on the long route? There was no way I was turning around. I was going to see where that road went to. And it turns out that road was 40 miles of dirt road. I'd never been on 40 miles of dirt road before until that day. But something really started sinking in while we were out there doing that. Like I said, I haven't passed any cars. There's nothing out there. Of course, there's no pavement, no stores, nothing like that. The alone feeling really started to set in. I mean, like I said, I haven't seen anything but a cow, a couple bushes here and there. Me, my rocks, or my friends, and the river running by. That's about it. We're alone. And I'm not exaggerating. There's a good chance that Lacey and I were probably 30 to 40 miles from the nearest person That's how far out we had got. Could you imagine being here and not being near a person all the way to Charlotte? That's kind of the idea of how far away we might have been from people, or civilization for that matter. But there was one consolation prize for the whole thing. Even though we were going down this dirt road, didn't want to be on this dirt road, probably shouldn't have been on this dirt road. I had the right vehicle for the job. If you want to pull that picture up, it was a Chevy Malibu. I'm going to tell you, this rental car right here and this Chevy Malibu, Chevy did wonders with this car. It is made to go off-roading. You know, John was talking about his Jeep last week and how it goes off-road. I'm going to tell you, his Jeep is nothing compared to a Chevy Malibu. We took it through creeks. We drove it over mountains. We drove it through the valleys. That car will get you from wherever you want to go to wherever you need to go. I swear, if there was a jump out there, I probably would have done it. I probably would have done it just because that's how confident I am in a Chevy Malibu. Now, of course, I'm kidding about that, but I want to share a Bible story with you that's kind of funny as well. So if you have your Bibles, flip over to Jonah. We're going to be in chapter 1. We're going to start in verse 1, and it goes something like this. And the words should be on the screen. Of course, I can't read that. All right. Chapter 1, verse 1 says, "The Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai. Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh. Announce my judgment against it, because I have seen how wicked its people are." But Jonah, he got up and he went the opposite direction, down to the port of Joppa, where he found a boat or a ship leaving for Tarshish. Now keep in mind, Tarshish in this context was considered the other side of the world. In present day, it's probably around Spain or something like that. But he bought a ticket and he went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. But the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted to their gods for help and threw cargo overboard to lighten the ship. But all this time, Jonah was sound asleep down in the hold. What a joker. Sleeping in the bottom of the ship in a storm? So what can we really kind of learn from these verses right here? So right off the bat, the first two verses, God gave instruction to Jonah, and he said, get up and go. And I want you to go to a specific place, and that specific place is Nineveh. Now, Nineveh was the capital city of an opposing culture to the Israelites. So it was like their mortal enemy. And it happened to be a really, really big cultural center. And it was just wicked. You know, God calls it wicked. And he told Jonah, he's like, I want you to go there. Tell these people they're wicked. And oh, by the way, because they're wicked, I'm going to go ahead and destroy that city. So it's starting to make a little bit more sense to why Jonah probably got on that ship. He didn't want to go there and do that. You know, he's one guy going against a whole big city. But what do we really learn from that? Jonah ignored what the Lord had asked him to do. And because he ignored what the Lord had asked him to do, other people started getting affected by his decisions. You know, his decisions caused a storm, and his decisions made guys think that they were about to die. They thought they were going to drown. You know, panic starts setting in. You know, they're throwing stuff overboard naturally, as they should be. But we're going to pick up the story if we hop down to verse 10, and it goes like this. It said, then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, why have you done this? For the men knew that he had fled from the presence of the Lord, because he told them. Jonah sat there and told these guys, I'm getting on this ship to run away from the Lord. So naturally, these guys are upset with Jonah now. They're not even believing in the same God that he does, and they know that he screwed up. So verse 11 says, then they said to him, what shall we do to you so that the sea may be calm for us? For the sea was growing more tempestuous. Now that word tempestuous is clearly the root word for tempting. So Jonah was tempted to run away from the Lord, and since he ran into that temptation situation, you know, he had a storm come into his life. But in verse 12, we can start to see that Jonah, he's starting to see how his decisions really, really messed up. And it said, verse 12 goes like this, and he said to him, pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea will become calm for you. For I know this great tempest is because of me. Jonah's sitting there saying, I would just rather die than have to deal with this. I'm already running from the Lord. Just throw me over the ship. I don't need to be here any longer. Jonah's sitting there ignoring the Lord. And since he did that, he didn't know a storm was going to come into his life at that point. He just thought he was running away. But also he didn't know right after this, he gets swallowed by a whale. Could you imagine being swallowed by a whale after a really bad decision? I can't either. But not to pick on Jonah too much, I've made a bad decision too. I'm down this dirt road that I'm not supposed to be on. But just like Jonah, and just like my phone told me right off the bat, we were told which route to take. Jonah was told where to go. I was told where to go. But we did not obey. God, on the other hand, he's asking us to obey. And he's actually asking every person in this room to reach out to him and ask where he wants them to go. He's wanting that for you. He doesn't want you to end up in a storm, and he doesn't want you to end up in the middle of the desert in a Chevy Malibu. That's not what he would want for your life. But you might be thinking, he's like, well, I have plans and I have destinations in mind of places I want to go to, so why can't I do that? Well, when we're following the Lord, it doesn't really matter what the destination is. See, if we just start following the steps that God has put in front of us, his destination is going to be better than what we have in mind. And it's also going to look different from person to person. Every person in this room has a different plan for their life. God doesn't want you to be your best friend. God doesn't want you to be like your mom or your dad. God doesn't want you to be like your brother and sister. He has something special planned for every person in this room. And it's really summed up in Jeremiah 29, verse 11. And it goes like this. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. That's what he's wanting for you. He wants to give you a good plan if we just listen to him. That's what he's wanting us to do. He doesn't want you to go through disaster. And I kind of reflect back and I think about this, I wish I would have read this verse before I started traveling down that road, because I would have really realized right off the bat that, hey, the paved road in this situation, that's good for me. That's a good road. But the dirt road is disaster. It leads to disaster. But again, like I said, in my situation, I'm out halfway in this trip. I realize I got a big problem. I've got Lacey in the car with me. We're in the middle of nowhere. I messed this up. I wasn't ready. And even though I thought a Chevy Malibu was a really good car, it was not the right car for the job. I actually did need John's Jeep to go down that dirt road. I was not supposed to be there. Just like Jonah was not supposed to be on that ship. Those were not the right plans for us. Now, can anyone relate to that? Can anyone relate to that kind of stuff in their life right now? Maybe you're sitting there saying, I'm just doing these things because I'm trying to fit in with a certain friend group or something like that. Or maybe you're saying, I like to try drugs just because I don't like going home and dealing with my reality, because my reality, it's just not fun. It's kind of intimidating. I got all this stuff pressuring me from the outside. Or maybe you're sitting there thinking, I'll just change my body and change who I am because I'm not really content or satisfied with how God made me. Or maybe you've got a boyfriend or a girlfriend that's been pressuring you into doing something that you're not comfortable with, but then you did it, and now it's just a cycle that you can't break out of. But God doesn't want that for any of us. But what do all those things actually have in common? All those things have in common that they're distractions to get us away from what God had intended for us. Just like that verse said, God intended a future of hope and a good future on top of that. And the band, you guys can join me on stage. But the stories don't end there. Jonah's story didn't end there. God actually provides a redemption story. So if we go to Jonah chapter 3 and start in verse 1, it goes like this. Then the Lord spoke to Jonah a second time Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh and deliver the message I have given you. But this time, Jonah obeyed the Lord's command and went to Nineveh, a city so large that it took 3 days to see it all. See, those same facts about Nineveh, they never changed. Nineveh was still a wicked city, and it was still a scary situation that Jonah was going to have to go deal with. But since he obeyed the Lord, something happened. Something happened when he got to Nineveh. He preached to them. He told those people, hey, y'all are wicked. God's going to destroy you. But since he did that and he obeyed the Lord, that city, they all repented and they went a separate way, and God actually did not destroy that city because one man decided he was going to obey the Lord. Here's also some good news. The Bible's full of history of people listening to the Lord and giving good examples of when they do. If you hop over to Exodus 13, starting in verse 17, you're going to find Moses and the Israelites. They're trying to leave Egypt and slavery, and they're trying to get to the promised land. And it goes like this, verse 17. When Pharaoh finally let the people go, God did not lead them through the Philistine territory, even though that was the shortest route to the promised land. God said, if the people are faced with a battle, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. Now that word shortest, it stood out to me. That's exactly what I tried to do. I tried to take a shortcut to a destination, and it caused real disaster. And God said here, and he warned the Israelites, hey, don't do this. Don't take that shortcut. You might want to return to Egypt. And kind of think of Egypt in this situation as like a retreating mindset. Because we as a people, we have a tendency to, when we face a battle that we're not ready for or that we're going up against, we tend to retreat back into something familiar. And sometimes those things that are familiar are not good for us. Verse 18. So God led them in a roundabout way through the wilderness towards the Red Sea. Thus, the Israelites left Egypt like an army ready for battle. See, they sat there and they finally listened to God, and look what happened. You know, it didn't make any sense that he took them a roundabout way. It didn't make any sense that he took them some random route, but it was what God had asked them to do. You know, Jonah's story, it turns out good. The Israelite story, it turns out good. But why do they turn out good? It's because they obeyed God. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that just because you do one thing for God, that everything's going to be peachy. Because if you're searching after God's path in your life and you want to be on the path that God's intended for you, sometimes that path's not going to be too easy. That path might not be straight. That path might not be the most glamorous thing that you ever do. And a lot of times that path's not even going to be a fun one to be on. But those things don't matter because God's path is always the best path in life to choose. It's always the right one to choose, no matter what you're dealing with. But you might be saying to yourself, well, I still feel kind of stuck. I'm looking into my life right now, and I'm not really sure what kind of path I'm on. I kind of feel like I'm stuck out in the desert. Well, just like I was still stuck out in the desert, I still needed to get out. But I wanted to get out, and I kept pushing, and I kept pressing. And then finally, after one of those bends that me and Lacey finally turned around, we saw headlights. We saw headlights to the road that we were supposed to be on the whole time. And I'm going to tell you, seeing those headlights, that was a weight lifted off my shoulders like I had never felt before. You know, joy and peace just started flooding in the car. We started to celebrate. I think we might have even started singing or doing something. I don't know. And I'm pretty sure we got cell phone reception back right then too. That was something to celebrate. But your story can be the same if you start reaching and trying to walk towards God. All he's asking is for one little step. All you got to do is put one step forward. And then you got to put another step forward. And you're going to come out of that desert situation. Then you can get back on the path that God had intended for you. And get in line with those cars in the headlights. You remember last week, John was talking about taking that narrow road. That's what God's trying to invite us into. He's wanting you to take that road with him. But again, if you're unsure of where you're at in your life right now, I want to encourage you that God does not ever give up on you, and he never gives up on me. And the reason why it's most evident is because he sent his son Jesus to that cross to die for our sins. That was Jesus' path in life. It was hard. But God's inviting us into him, into his will, and he wants to do the same thing for us. He wants to prosper us. He wants to bring you peace. And he wants to bring you joy, and he wants to bring you contentment, but he's just asking you to take that step with him. And if you're confused on where you're at in your life right now, and you're wanting to get out of a situation that you may not want to be in, even if you didn't cause it, I encourage you to talk to a small group leader tonight, maybe talk to Pastor John, and try to seek some of those answers that you've been searching for. Guys, it was really an honor and it was a privilege to come up here and share what God had laid on my heart. But God really wants you to follow the path that he has planned out for your life.